I'm going to tell you today why thinking you're special might be destroying your life without you even realizing it. And why accepting that the world owes you absolutely nothing could be the most liberating thing you'll hear today. You know that feeling when you wake up in the morning, expecting things to just go your way? When you get irritated because traffic doesn't cooperate, because your boss doesn't recognize your work, because people don't treat you the way you think you deserve? That's what we're going to talk about. I was thinking about this yesterday when I saw a guy at the grocery store complaining loudly because the line was moving slow. He was huffing, sighing, checking his watch like the entire world had conspired against him in that moment. And it hit me. How many times have I been that guy? How many times have you been? The truth is, we grow up thinking the world revolves around us, that things should work out because, well, just because. Because it's us. Because we deserve it. Because we work hard. Because we're good people. Because we pay our taxes. But let me ask you a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if everything you believe about deserving things is actually sabotaging you? What if this constant expectation that the world owes you something is preventing you from really living? Does that sound completely wrong to you? Or does it make sense in a way you don't want to admit? And hey, if you're here with me on this reflection, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Because we're going deep into this topic that nobody wants to touch, but everybody needs to hear. Remember the last time you got really frustrated with something? Not that passing irritation, but that deep anger that sits in your chest for hours, sometimes days. Maybe it was at work. You presented a project, spent weeks preparing, walked in there confident and nothing. No praise, no recognition. Or worse, someone who did less than you got the credit. Or maybe it was in a relationship. You did everything right. You were thoughtful, caring, present. And still, the person didn't respond the way you expected, didn't give you the attention you thought you deserved. Or maybe it was something simpler. You held the door for someone and they didn't even say thank you. You let someone merge in traffic and they didn't wave. Small things that left a bitter taste in your mouth. Close your eyes for a second and remember that feeling, that tightness in your chest. That voice in your head saying, I didn't deserve that. After everything I did, how could they? Now take a deep breath and think with me. Where does that expectation come from? Who said the world should recognize you? Who guaranteed that being a good person entitles you to anything? I know this sounds harsh, maybe even cruel, but stay with me. There's a constant noise in our heads, you know? It's like we live with an invisible soundtrack playing all the time. You deserve more. This isn't fair. You're special. Things should be different. This noise comes from way back, from childhood, when our parents told us we were unique, special, that we could be anything. From school, where everybody gets a participation trophy. From social media, where everyone's the protagonist of their own life. And don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing that. There's love in those messages. There's care. But there's also a silent trap that we only notice when we've already fallen into it. The trap of thinking the universe conspires in our favor. That we deserve good things just for existing. That the world has a debt to us that needs to be paid. There was a time when men knew life was hard. Not because they were pessimistic, but because that was reality. Your grandfather woke up early, worked until his hands bled, came home tired, and didn't expect applause for it. It was what had to be done. There wasn't this expectation that work should be fulfilling, that the boss should be your friend, that every effort should be recognized. Recognition came from within, from knowing you did your part. The world out there? The world followed its course, indifferent. There was dignity in that, a quiet strength. It wasn't resignation. It was clarity. Clarity about what you can control and what you can't. Today, we live in constant noise. Everyone has an opinion about everything. Everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone is special, unique, has something important to say. And suddenly, being special lost its meaning. When everyone is special, no one is. But the difference isn't just in the noise. It's in the expectation. Our grandfathers didn't expect the world to be fair. They knew that sometimes you do everything right and things still go wrong. That sometimes you're kind and people are rude. That sometimes you work hard and someone else gets the credit. And you know what that generated? Not bitterness, liberation. When you don't expect anything from the world, everything that comes is a bonus. When you don't think you deserve special treatment, any kindness becomes genuine. When you don't demand recognition, any recognition that comes has real value. The difference between silence and noise isn't just volume, it's expectation. In silence, you do your part and move on. In noise, you do your part and wait for applause. Let me tell you about some things you might recognize. I won't name names, just situations. Small gestures that reveal this giant expectation we carry. You send a message and keep checking if the person saw it. If they took a while to respond, you start creating theories. They're ignoring me. I said something wrong. Maybe they don't like me anymore. The person might be busy, might have forgotten, might be going through something that has nothing to do with you. But no, it has to be about you. You do someone a favor and wait for them to return it. Not now, but sometime. You don't charge explicitly, but there's a silent accounting in your head. I helped him that day. I was there when she needed me. And when that person doesn't reciprocate the way you expect, there's disappointment. As if the world were out of balance. You work late, do more than asked, deliver everything on time, and when there's no recognition, there's an irritation that keeps gnawing. Nobody sees what I do. They don't know how much I dedicate myself. But who said anyone needs to see? Who guaranteed that dedication generates recognition? You're polite in traffic, in the bank line, in the elevator. And when people aren't polite back, there's discomfort. As if courtesy were a currency that should be exchanged, not a value you choose to live by. You post something on social media and keep checking how many likes it got. If it didn't get the likes you expected, there's a small disappointment. As if the value of what you shared depended on others' approval. You invite someone out, and they decline, instead of accepting that they might be busy, tired, or simply not interested. You personalize it. They don't like me. I'm not interesting enough. Maybe I did something wrong. These are small gestures, small expectations, but they accumulate like dust until your worldview gets blurry, until you live more in expectation than in experience. And the worst part, you don't even realize you're doing it. These expectations are so automatic, they seem natural. Of course people should reciprocate kindness. Of course work should be recognized. Of course courtesy should generate courtesy. But what if it shouldn't? What if these expectations are just stories we tell ourselves? What if the world works completely differently than we imagine? There's a moment in every man's life when he discovers a truth nobody wants to talk about. It might be at 25, 35, 45. Doesn't matter when. What matters is that it happens, and it's always painful. The truth is this: you're not special. Not the way you think you are. I know this sounds brutal. I know it goes against everything you were taught, but stay with me, because there's liberation on the other side of this pain. You're not special because your problems are unique. Everyone has problems. Everyone suffers. Everyone has pain that no one else knows. Your pain isn't bigger, isn't more important, isn't more worthy of attention than anyone else's. You're not special because you work hard. Millions of people work hard every day. Parents working 2 shifts to support their family. Mothers waking up at dawn to care for a sick child. People you don't even know carrying weights you can't imagine. You're not special because you're a good person. There are lots of good people in the world. People who help without expecting anything in return. Who are kind without demanding kindness back. Who do right even when no one's watching. You're not special because you have dreams. Everyone has dreams. Everyone has things they want to achieve, places they want to go, versions of themselves they want to become. So why should you be treated differently? Why should your expectations be met? Why should the world bow to your needs? The answer is simple and painful. It shouldn't, and it won't. The world owes you nothing. It doesn't owe recognition for your work. It doesn't owe kindness for your courtesy. It doesn't owe love for your love. It doesn't owe success for your effort. The world simply is. It operates by its own rules, which weren't written with you in mind. People make their own choices based on their own criteria, which might not include you. Things happen for millions of reasons that have nothing to do with what you deserve. And you know what's the hardest part to accept? This isn't an injustice. It's just reality. When you were a child, the world revolved around you. Your parents did everything to protect you, please you, make you happy. You cried and someone appeared. You needed something and someone provided it. You were literally the center of the universe. But you grew up, and the universe didn't grow with you. It kept functioning the way it always functioned, indifferent, neutral, owing nothing to anyone. The pain you feel when things don't go as expected isn't the world being unfair to you. It's you discovering how the world really works and resisting that discovery. Because it's easier to believe the world is wrong than to accept that your expectations might be misguided. It's more comfortable to feel like a victim of injustices than to take responsibility for your own reactions. But let me tell you a secret that took me years to discover. When you accept that the world owes you nothing, something magical happens. You stop living in expectation and start living in experience. You stop demanding and start being grateful. You stop feeling like a victim and start feeling free. Because when you expect nothing, everything becomes a gift. When you don't demand recognition, any recognition that comes is genuine. When you don't require kindness, any kindness you receive has real value. And most importantly, when you stop thinking you deserve special treatment, you stop constantly disappointing yourself. You stop living in frustration and start living in reality. Oh, but there's a huge difference between accepting that the world owes you nothing and giving up, between letting go of expectations and quitting everything, between being realistic and being pessimistic. When you accept that the world owes you nothing, you don't stop doing your part. You keep working hard, being kind, helping people. The difference is that you do it by choice, not by expectation of return. You work well because that's the kind of person you chose to be, not because you expect recognition. You're kind because kindness is a value you carry, not because you expect kindness back. You help because helping makes sense to you, not because you expect gratitude. There's enormous strength in that. A dignity that doesn't depend on external approval. A peace that can't be broken by disappointments. Remember that guy at the grocery store I mentioned at the beginning? Imagine if he had left home knowing that the world didn't owe him an empty store, fast service, a line that moved at the pace he wanted. Imagine if he had gone there knowing he would find exactly what he found, a world functioning the way the world functions. He would have bought the same things. He would have gone home, but he would have done it in peace instead of carrying irritation in his chest. That's the difference. It's not about giving up. It's about choosing your battles. It's about focusing on what you can control, instead of getting frustrated with what you can't. You can control how you work, but you can't control if your work will be recognized. You can control how you treat people, but you can't control how they'll treat you back. You can control your values, but you can't control if other people will share those values. And when you focus on what you can control, something interesting happens. You get better at it. You work better when you're not obsessed with recognition. You're more genuinely kind when you're not expecting kindness back. You live your values more purely when you don't depend on others' validation. Ironically, when you stop needing the world starts respecting you more. Not always, not everyone, but more than when you are desperate for approval. People can sense when you need them versus when you choose to be with them. They can sense when you're doing something out of expectation versus when you're doing it out of value. And they respond differently. But even if they didn't respond, even if nothing changed externally, you'd be at peace, because your peace wouldn't depend on their reaction anymore. There's a silence you only find when you accept that the world owes you nothing. It's not the silence of resignation. It's the silence of clarity. It's the silence of knowing exactly where you stand, of not needing external validation to be certain of your values, of not depending on others' recognition to know your own worth. In that silence, you hear things that the noise of expectations wouldn't let you listen to. You hear your own voice, your own criteria, your own reasons for doing the things you do. You discover there's joy in doing well, regardless of who's watching. That there's satisfaction in being kind, even when no one reciprocates. That there's peace in giving your best, without expecting the world to reward your efforts. This doesn't mean you become a cold or indifferent person. On the contrary, when you're not obsessed with return, you can love more freely. When you're not demanding from people, you can truly connect with them. When you're not expecting the world to give you something, you can give to the world without calculation. It's strange how it works. When you most need something, it least appears. When you most demand recognition, the less you're recognized. When you most require love, the less loved you feel. But when you let go of those demands, when you stop charging the world, things start flowing more naturally. Not because the world changed, it's because you changed. You're no longer living in constant expectation that things should be different. You're living with things as they are. And paradoxically, when you accept things as they are, you become more capable of changing them, because you're no longer wasting energy fighting reality. Think about how many hours a day you spend getting irritated with things you can't control, with traffic, with the bank line, with slow service, with people's rudeness, with the ingratitude of those you helped. Now imagine if you took all that energy and directed it towards something you can control, toward your work, your relationships, your projects, your growth. The difference would be huge, not just in productivity, but in the quality of your experience. You'd be living in what is, instead of fighting what should be. And there's a freedom in that that's hard to explain until you feel it. It's the freedom of not needing the world to be different for you to be happy. The freedom of not depending on others' approval to approve of yourself. The freedom of not needing external recognition to recognize your own value. There's a question that changed my perspective on all of this. It's simple, but cutting. Why do you think your life should be easier than anyone else's? Why should your problems be smaller? Why should your pain be more bearable? Why should your path have fewer obstacles? Everyone you admire, Everyone who achieved something significant, everyone you respect went through difficulties, worked without recognition, was kind to those who didn't deserve it, gave more than they received, and they did it not because the world owed them something, but because they chose to do it. The difference between people you admire and people you don't admire isn't that the first ones had easier lives. It's that they accepted that life is hard and chose to be who they wanted to be anyway. They didn't wait for the world to recognize their value to start living with dignity. They didn't wait for people to be kind to start being kind. They didn't wait for life to be fair to start doing their part. They simply did it. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Not because the world deserved it, but because they chose to be that kind of person. And you know what else? Most of these people you admire went through a moment like what you might be going through now. A moment of discovering that the world doesn't work the way they thought it should work. A moment of anger, disappointment, feeling that life was unfair. The difference is what they did with that discovery. Some people get stuck in it forever, complaining that the world isn't how it should be. Others use that discovery as a starting point for something bigger. They realize that if the world isn't going to give them things, they'll have to go after them. If the world isn't going to recognize their value, they'll have to find value in what they do regardless of recognition. If the world isn't going to be kind to them, they'll choose to be kind anyway. Not out of obligation, by choice, because that's the person they chose to be. And when you make that choice, when you decide to be who you want to be, regardless of how the world treats you, something changes. You don't change the world, but you change your relationship with the world. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of your own experience. You stop reacting to what happens to you and start acting based on who you chose to be. This doesn't mean you won't get frustrated anymore, won't get disappointed anymore, won't feel anger anymore. It means those emotions won't control your life anymore. They'll pass through you, but you won't get stuck in them. Because you'll have something bigger than your momentary emotions. You'll have your values, your choices, your identity, and those things don't depend on how the world treats you. Let me tell you what happens when you truly accept that the world owes you nothing. Not just intellectually, but deep in your chest, where things really change. First, you stop feeling betrayed by small things. When someone doesn't return a favor, when your work isn't recognized, when people are rude, it doesn't affect you the same way anymore. Not because you became insensitive, but because you weren't expecting it to be different. Second, you start truly valuing the good things that happen. When someone is kind, when your work is recognized, when you receive unexpected affection, it has a much bigger impact. Because you weren't demanding it, weren't expecting it. It was genuinely a gift. Third, you become more present. When you're not always evaluating whether you're receiving what you deserve, you can really experience what's happening. You can truly connect with people, truly engage with work, truly live the moment. Fourth, you develop a confidence that doesn't depend on external validation. Because you know why you do what you do. You know what your values are. You know who you chose to be. And that doesn't change based on how people react to you. Fifth, you become more generous. When you're not calculating return, you can give freely. You can help without expecting gratitude. You can love without expecting love back. You can be kind without expecting kindness. And there's something more subtle that happens. You stop living defensively. When you're not always protecting your expectations, you can be more open. You can take more risks. You can try new things without fear of not receiving what you think you deserve. You stop personalizing everything. When someone is in a bad mood, You don't assume it's about you. When something goes wrong, you don't look for culprits. When things don't go as planned, you don't feel persecuted by the universe. You understand that people make their own choices based on their own circumstances, which most of the time have nothing to do with you. That the world operates according to its own rules, which were created long before you were born and will continue long after you're gone. And paradoxically, when you stop needing so much from people, they start feeling more comfortable around you. When you stop demanding so much from life, it flows more naturally. When you stop requiring recognition, your work improves. Not because the world changed, because you changed. You stopped wasting energy fighting reality and started using that energy to build something. There's a peace in that that's hard to describe. It's not the peace of someone who gave up. It's the peace of someone who understood the rules of the game and decided to play well anyway. But I don't want you to think this is easy, or that it's something you decide once and boom, changed forever. It's not like that. Accepting that the world owes you nothing is a process. It's something you have to choose again every day, sometimes several times a day. Because it's natural to expect reciprocity. It's human to want recognition. It's normal to feel special. The problem isn't having these feelings. The problem is letting these feelings control your life. There will be days when you'll work hard and nobody will notice, and that will bother you. There will be days when you'll be kind and people will be rude and you'll get irritated. There will be days when you'll give your best and things will go wrong anyway, and you'll get frustrated. That's normal. That's part of it. The difference is that you won't get stuck in those feelings. You'll feel them, acknowledge them, and then let go. Because you remember that the world doesn't operate based on what you think you deserve. And there's something important. Accepting that the world owes you nothing doesn't mean you can't want things. You can want recognition. You can want kindness. You can want things to be fair. The difference is that you won't make your happiness depend on those things. You'll work for recognition, but you won't get depressed if it doesn't come. You'll be kind, expecting kindness, but you won't get bitter if it doesn't appear. You'll fight for justice, but you won't feel like a victim when it doesn't exist. Because deep down, you know your peace doesn't depend on those things. Your dignity doesn't depend on others' approval. Your value doesn't depend on external recognition. And there will be moments when you'll forget this. Moments when you'll fall into the trap of thinking you deserve something you're not receiving. Moments when you'll feel wronged, misunderstood, undervalued. When that happens, don't judge yourself. Just remember, the world owes me nothing. And that's not a punishment, it's liberation. Because when you owe nothing to the world and the world owes nothing to you, you're even. You're free to choose who you want to be. The world is free to be what it is. And in that space between you two, there's a possibility for something genuine to happen. Not based on expectations, but on choices. Not based on what one owes the other, but on what each chooses to give. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the really good things in life happen. When nobody owes anything to anyone, but everyone chooses to give something anyway. So let me ask you one last question. Not for you to answer to me, but for you to answer to yourself. When you're alone, in the silence of your thoughts, what would you do if you knew the world was never going to give you what you think you deserve? If you knew that nobody was going to recognize all your effort? If you knew they won't always be kind to you when you're kind? If you knew life wasn't going to be fair? Would you stop trying? Stop being kind? Stop doing your part? Or would you keep doing all of that, not because you expect something in return, but because that's the person you chose to be. Because if the answer is the second one, you already understand everything. You're already free. And if the answer is the first one, that's okay too. It means you still have a journey ahead. A journey of discovering who you are when there's no audience, who you want to be when nobody's watching, what kind of man you choose to be when the world isn't giving you anything in return. It's a difficult journey, but it's the only one worth taking. Because at the end of it, you won't need the world to validate who you are. You'll know. And when you know who you are, regardless of how the world treats you, you'll have something that nobody can take from you. Something that doesn't depend on external circumstances, on others' approval, on recognition or gratitude. You'll have yourself, whole, complete, free, and maybe that's what it means to be truly special. Not because the world owes you something, but because you chose to be who you are, even when the world owed you nothing. If you made it here with me on this reflection, if these words made sense somehow, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Because these conversations are important. They're about who we choose to be when nobody's watching. They're about finding dignity in a world that doesn't owe you dignity. They're about being free in a world that tries to trap you in expectations. And remember, the world owes you nothing. But that's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of it. See you later, and I'll see you in the next video that's going to show up right here on the screen.